Hey folks, welcome to Sorting Myself Out. I'm actually really excited this week because I just spent a couple days with Dr. Roger Strachan, who is an amazing psychologist. He's in his 80s now, and we did some filming. And I'm going to bring you some of that footage here over the next couple weeks. I'm planning on getting the editing done as soon as I can so I can release the first video. I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to learn a ton about psychology. And he has been around since the 50s, 60s, right? Where psychology started to take some huge turns. So it's going to give us a lot of perspective, as well as he's just got these wonderful tools and techniques for personal growth and understanding humans and how we can apply that directly to our lives and share it with other people. So I think it's going to be really a great piece of information. We're probably going to release it in, 45-minute segments or so. So you can look forward to that. Today, I've got a special podcast for you that we had with an audience member. This is technically our third podcast with an audience member. The first one we did was with Rob, and he wasn't an audience member until after we did it with him, but now he's an audience member. And then we did one with Nolan, and now we're doing this one that's presented today with James. And James came to the table with seeking some advice on relationship issues, personal direction in life. He's a very great guy. He's in a PhD program for mathematics. He's really working on sorting himself out, and he's just extremely authentic. And it was just a joy and a pleasure talking to him. And I feel like I walked away with a great connection, and I think fondly back on this conversation. So I hope you really enjoy it. Sorting myself out, what are we doing here with this channel? We're kind of putting out so many different types of videos that I could imagine as an audience member, you're kind of tracking, thinking, okay, so they do some of this, they do some of that. Like, what's the through line here? And I'm really meditating on this a lot. And I think the through line is anything that has to do with authenticity and human transformation. And so sometimes that's going to be interviews with professionals in the field. We got the Ken Wilber stuff I'm still working on. We won't be able to release that for a little longer due to Tim Freak and I have agreed to release it at the same time. We got people like Dr. Strachan. We got people, obviously, like I just mentioned, Tim Freak. I've got other interviews lined up with prominent figures in the field of psychology, philosophy, transformation. So that'll be a part of it. Also, we have Mercury, who's just a wonderful speaker. And he's just so lucid in the way that he understands life. And he has all these unique experiences to share. And he's a really important part of all this. I mean, he's a powerhouse on this channel. So we have that. And then we've got my vlogs, and we've got ideas that I'm working on presenting, being in grad school, working on fine-tuning my own skill set, being authentic and vulnerable with you all, as well as growing in my ability as a young philosopher, as somebody who strives to be a good psychologist. And so I'm going to bounce things off of you. So there's all these different threads that we're going to express in, but I think the through line is this authentic transformation, whether I'm speaking or Mercury speaking or Dr. Strachan speaking or Ken Wilber speaking, or who knows, Jordan Peterson might come on one day. I know that's rather ambitious, but who knows? We could just dream this up together. And then there'll be creative videos. I post like the poem I posted about the young boy, the inner child inside of me that I've been learning to re-raise because I realized that I had been neglecting a part of myself, and I had been in this inner cycle of abuse and depression and anger. And this is something I've been working on for years. And now I'm reaching a new pinnacle of growth with that childlike part of myself. And it's creating this whole new awareness in my life. It's giving me more energy and more clarity. And so I'm re-raising my own inner child, and I'm letting go of all the resentment and bitterness and sadness of the past. And I'm bringing him forward into a new journey. And so I'll share my personal transformation process as we go along here. But the reason I shared that video is it's like, I didn't really make that video for anyone but myself. And I thought that in the spirit of this channel, if I'm afraid to share who I am with you guys, what's the point? What's the point of doing it? Like, that's who I am. That's that's an authentic part of who I am. So it doesn't matter who likes it or not, right? Like, this is what it is. And some people are going to like it. Some people aren't going to like it. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we're doing this for people who resonate with this type of energy, with this type of vibe. And that's the community we're trying to build. So I had a great week off. I hope you enjoy this conversation with James. He's such a good guy. There's so many of you out there are such amazing people, like, literally. It's just, I never would have met you. I mean, people in the comments who are always writing or always reaching out, emails. It's just it's a total blessing. I know Mercury feels the same way. He feels the same way about this. Wow. Anyways, we're just going to keep trucking along. I don't know where we have decided that this channel is partly about spontaneity and authenticity. So we don't have a structure right now. We don't have a schedule right now. I'm going to post videos when I feel like posting videos. And a lot of times I feel like posting videos. And sometimes they're different. Sometimes they're, something totally unexpected. Other times they're totally predictable. So that's the way we're doing it. We're embracing the chaos of intuition, and we're turning it into some semblance of order and beauty as much as we can. That's what we're striving for. And we're so touched by anybody who feels served by this in any way. And your contributions of support and your comments and we can just feel the support. We can feel that you're there. And anyways, enough of my rant. You're all so awesome. Enjoy this conversation with James. So James, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about what brought you to reach out to us and got you to this point?
Yeah, sure. So I guess so I started like many people who have come across Andrew's channel before you guys took it over. I found Andrew's channel through Jordan Peterson, and I actually originally saw Mercury's 3, I think, conversations with Andrew, and I thought that he had a lot of really interesting insight, and some of the ideas really helped me out quite a bit, actually. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, you guys have been putting out some pretty interesting content, and even though I'm quite busy, I've been doing my best to keep up with it.
Yeah, you mentioned you're in a PhD program for mathematics. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm in my 3rd year of the math PhD program, and what I'm interested in is kind of some more mathematical physicsy kind of stuff. But on the side, I've also been really interested since starting to listen to Jordan Peterson and Jung's ideas.
Okay.
So I've been reading, or I have read a few of his books and trying to understand as much as I can. But he's quite an interesting thinker, and it's not always easy.
Yeah, he's kind of cryptic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
What books of his have you started with?
So I started out with Man and His Symbols, the one that he wrote near the end of his life with a few of his collaborators.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And I also read Archetypes in the Collective Unconscious.
Okay.
His autobiography. I tried reading Answer to Job, but that one proved to be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And right now I'm on Ion or Aeon, however you say it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peterson's big on Ion.
Yeah.
Well, that's great that you're finding the time to read Jung while you're studying mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that mathematics has any sort of relationship to Jung's thoughts? I mean, as somebody who's into that sort of thinking, do you see a relationship?
Yeah, so I think the reason why at least for me, there seems to be a connection in the sense that all these sort of religious symbolic worldviews are in many ways very abstract and just I guess sort of trying to get at structures itself, not so much just physical manifestations of these structures. And in mathematics, a lot of what you study is you try and build a framework and where you can just look at structure itself without necessarily any sort of physical manifestation of that structure. And so I think that's part of the reason why I find it really interesting, like these ideas of archetypes as sort of these a priori structures that govern a lot of our behavior. So I think all these sorts of things are really interesting for
Yes.
that sort of reason. Yeah.
And I think as we continue to develop in the field of psychology and mold that in with neuroscience more and more, which is
Mhm.
starting to happen a lot, what we're going to find is that all these different avenues and structures have this really interdisciplinary through line.
Yeah.
Because I just finished writing a paper on how the archetypes relate to a priori biological inheritance. So we actually have, there's actually a genetic argument to be made for the imagistic experience of the archetypal realm. And
Hmm.
Peterson actually really, if you listen to him speak, he really understands neurophysiology and archetypes on this really connected level, because he talks as if it's not just this, spiritual idea, but it's this combination of this, archetypal imaginistic realm and this physiological component.
Yeah.
And I just find it fascinating when those things get brought together. And I'd be really interested to see how mathematics adds into some of his ideas, because he was kind of, if you see some of his drawings and some of his ideas, he had this one paper he wrote, the
Mhm.
structure and dynamics of the psyche. And there's these kind of almost geometrical patterns that he ends up drawing that I think
Mhm.
would be interesting to hear from a mathematical point of view. But anyways, I digress. Mercury, what anything you want to add to that before I uh, take us into the real topic here?
No, I was just enjoying listening to you guys, actually.
Cool. So
Cool.
you actually said that I don't want to get too far down the wormhole, because you said that there was some pretty important stuff going on in your life.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm going to, I guess, keep not go into as much detail as, or not go into that much detail, but the there's sort of this idea that, or not idea, but this some choices, some big life choices that I've been thinking about, in terms of career, relationship, as in who I'm going to end up marrying and that sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, or just like maybe long-term partnership, not even necessarily marrying, I guess. And I find that for me, I have a pretty hard time committing to big life decisions. And the way that I tend to deal with such a decision is sort of put it off and think about it from as many angles as I can until it gets to the point where something forces me to make a decision, whether it's like I can't stand being in this sort of limbo anymore because it's very stressful, or like some other external thing. But the reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about it is because in one of Mercury's live streams, he talked about um, having truth as your sort of highest value, and um, even being truthful about how you feel and what you want out of life in each moment, even at the expense of being consistent with what you've wanted in the past. And so, what I've been wondering and trying to figure out is, how do you make a huge life decision when moment to moment what you want regarding this decision completely reverses itself, it seems. And I guess what sort of level of resolution across time do you look at to sort of make such big life decisions? Because I feel like if I made the decision in one moment, then the next moment I might completely regret the decision, and then try and do something to sort of undo the decision and go the other way. And um, so yeah, I'm just curious to hear what you guys think about that.
Okay, so yeah, and I do think like taking truth as the pinnacle or one of the pinnacle decisions to make, to follow that is very important. And
Mhm.
one reason a lot of people have trouble with it is because we are not internally consistent. Um, people are full of conflicting sort of subpersonalities. We're full of paradox. And even with something as simple as, like, we have a tendency to give one answer to everything as if we are easily defined. So if I say to you, do you like oatmeal? You'll have a tendency to answer yes or no. But the fact is, even if your answer is yes, like, it's not true in an absolute sense. You don't like oatmeal when you're full, or with something else. Like, you could say, do you like skiing? And you could say, yes, I love skiing. But if I wake you up at 2 a.m. and expect you to be all excited to go skiing, you won't be. When we answer things, we're usually we're kind of trying to average things out, or we're imagining the specific situation where I like oatmeal, but you're imagining it simply as breakfast and once a week. And so also with every choice you make, there's an upside and a downside to all of it. So any choice you make is going to give you certain freedoms, like certain opportunities to do things you wouldn't have had if you weren't pursuing it, but limits everything else. And so there's also just that level of complexity to reality, that no decision's easy. And even your best decision is going to come with problems. And there will be times you'll regret something, even if overall you're glad you're doing it, and that moment of regret was temporary. So I find it's about paying, like, honest attention to what's going on inside yourself and noticing the varieties of you that have opinions on something. So, and one thing is your emotional state very much changes all of you, and even really changes the world. So I don't know how much your different thoughts at different times have to do with different emotional states, or but if you are someone who has anything, depression, anxiety, enthusiastic periods, is examine how you feel in each period about something. And so then, like, I know that my depressed self thinks that doing this channel is a fucking bullshit idea. I know that's what it thinks of it. Or, like, the worst depression, the suicidal. And I'm not surprised if when I get depressed, that comes back up. And it's to look at overall, if 90% of the time you agree with a certain decision, but 10% of the time when you're, I don't know, when you have anxiety and are regretting being committed to something, then you can make your decision based on that. Like, or even when it's something 50-50, like, because it might be two competing things. You might have a strong ambitious sense, or a strong sense of wanting to achieve something, yet you may also really value time alone with no commitment for just introspection. Be aware that both of those things are there, and try to satisfy both of them in whatever way you can. So whether that's pursuing something with less hours, but that you find meaningful and can work towards, or whether it's just making sure to, like, to have a job where you have 3-day weekends twice a month, and where you take that off to satisfy both. So I would say it's just about being self-aware, not denying. And also, sometimes people will deny a deep dream or something because it's not realistic. And so, like, the whole sour grapes thing, you pretend that it's not that you can't get the grapes, but that you didn't want them anyway. And I don't think that's healthy. And it can be hard to admit, you know, I want to be a fucking rock star, but never will. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We're full of those kind of things. So if there's something that, you know, you do want to do, but you just realize you will not be able to, don't deny that you want to do it, but accept that it's not realistic.
What does that bring up for you, James?
So I think the important, or one of the most interesting or important parts of that was recognizing how your emotional state affects how you lean or what direction you lean towards in the decision. And I definitely find that when I'm, say, happier or enjoying what I'm doing more, that I lean one way, and when I'm maybe more, I guess, depressed or just or lonely or whatever, I lean another direction. And so I don't try to deny how I feel in each of those situations, but it makes me, because it seems that both of those states are always going to be there. It makes it difficult for me to figure out which one I should take as
Right.
one that will determine the decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I want to make sure there's a couple of things I want to add in here. And one is I want to make sure that I'm hearing everything that you're saying. Like, I want to make sure I understand you. So you have some big decisions in your life.
Yep.
And you're having a hard time making a choice because from one moment to the next or one day to the next, you have totally opposing feelings about this choice.
Yes.
And also you don't want to get into too much detail, I'm assuming, because we're recording. But if you feel like it would be more helpful for you to give more detail and you don't want that posted, that's what's important. So if you need to give more detail to feel fully understood, then do it. And you can just decide, okay, I don't want you to post that part, or I want you to edit it out. So that's the other piece. So
or feel free to use a metaphor instead. Like say, okay, I'm trying to decide whether to join the circus or not.
Sure.
The enthusiastic part of me thinks it'll be great, blah, blah. So feel free to pick some sort of metaphor to decide it if you want as well.
So, but what I want to make sure is you feel, is it, what's the emotion that you're struggling with? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel stifled? What is it that is coming up for you in response to this opposing tension in your life?
I think it's mostly just, or primarily, the stress of having to make the decision and knowing that either way there's going to be potential negative consequences that it's like I don't want to deal with either of the negative consequences, so I can't figure out which of the two bad parts of the outcomes that I'm it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't in some way.
So my next question is, what is making you feel like it's so urgent that you make a decision right now? Is it time sensitive? Is it like, if I don't make this decision, then it's not going to be there to make later?
Yeah, that's right.
So it won't be there maybe 3 months from now or next year.
Right.
Okay, so it's kind of like you have to give a yes or no.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is stressful. That does sound stressful.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the parts of you that want to do it and how they feel, and the parts of you that don't. Just because a part of me wants to go jerk off right now doesn't mean that I should give myself that.
Yeah.
So,
I have something to add to that.
But one more thing first, before, if that's okay, Merc, because I just want to finish that thought. So what you owe yourself allegiance to is your highest potential, your true self, your soul. You could call it whatever you want. Carl Jung called it the self, right? The self. That's the part of you that when you close your eyes and picture your best future, that's what you see. That person. That's not just physically accomplishing goals, but really feels solid. Like you can feel in your body that this is the kind of person that I truly am if I fulfill my potential. That's your true self. So that's who you owe your allegiance to. So whatever that aspect of you wants, that's the voice you should listen to. Now there's going to be all these other voices. There's going to be voices of resentment and bitterness and jealousy and instant gratification and fun and athleticism and whatever. There's going to be philosophy. There's going to be all sorts of different drives within you. You only owe your allegiance to your capital T truth. That's all I had to say, Merc. So you can jump in now.
Yeah, and anything I said about paying attention to your various sub-personalities, I didn't mean listen to them all in the sense of take their advice.
Right.
I meant hear what they're saying. But one thing that does work, I find, is So say every time I get depressed, I know I'm going, like when I get depressed, there's certain thoughts that are going to come up every single time I'm depressed about the channel.
Right.
What I do is pay attention to those thoughts, wait until I am in a better mood, and then answer them almost like I'm talking to a different person. And you choose the states of mind where you make the decisions best. So like I know when I'm suicidally depressed, I won't make good decisions. So I'll listen to everything the suicidal me wants to quit, like including life itself. But when I'm feeling balanced and clear-headed, that's when I make my decisions. And then it's a matter of making the decisions and remembering when you get depressed what you had decided before. If that's a thought you repeatedly get while depressed, pay attention to that thought when you're optimistic. Compare and also look at it more realistically. Like when you're in a better mood, is that realistic? And then stick to what you decided when you were clear-headed and taking everything into account.
Yeah.
So let's do a review. What are you learning so far? Ask a question and then listen. Don't just keep asking questions. Listen for the answer, right? I know a lot of people that say they pray, right? They go praying and they ask and say, but I never get anything back. But what they do is they just pray, and then they don't listen for anything to come back. So it's like if imagine doing that in a relationship. If you're always talking and then you complain about how the other person never responds, but you never shut your goddamn mouth in the first place. And when you do shut your mouth, you close your ears.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's a religious thing. It's just a metaphor for the fact that when we want something in life, even a prayer is really a psychological mode of communication. You're asking for inspiration from within yourself, if anything, at minimum. At minimum, that's what you're doing. So that's kind of what Peterson means by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So what are you going to do now? What's next?
Yeah, good question. I'll probably, when you send me the video, rewatch it and make sure that everything you said is actually sunk in. And maybe I guess just at least take a few days and really spend some time just sitting and I guess meditating, really trying to clear my head to, like you said, try and actually listen to get an answer to these sorts of questions.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess also just maybe take it one day at a time, like Peterson says. When you're in a very stressful situation, you should shrink your time frame to what is small to into the future, or as short into the future as it needs to be.
Yes.
Make sure that you can actually make it through. So.
Yeah, and I just want to leave you with this statement that Peterson also talks about a lot in regards to quoting Carl Jung, and I think it's Latin, like alluvitus. I don't remember, but it means what you most need is where you least want to look, and he talks about that all the time. And he talks about how that's why the quest for the Holy Grail, when they sat around the round table, they decided to start by looking in all the darkest places.
Yeah.
And so I just have a feeling that really applies here. That like there's places that you don't want to look right now because it's uncomfortable, but like those are the places that are actually going to help you in this situation. So that's my ending piece for me. Fantastic. Right on. Well, if I was going to be really stubborn, I'd ask you to make a more specific plan for how you're going to move forward. But
maybe I'll make one and send it to you.
Yeah, if you feel like it. I feel like we've thrown a lot at you, and I get the sense that you really do want to work on this. So I won't hold your feet to the fire too much. But if you do want to send us some more specific things that you want to start working on, we're here for you. and we'll respond as much as we can. And if you want to come back on again in a couple weeks or a couple months and just talk to us about how it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if you please know this, because this is one of the biggest things I always tell people. Relapse is not a failure. And when I say relapse, it's the repetition of an unwanted behavior. Is not failure. The only failure is the failure to learn. Whatever happens, we accept it. And we just want the best for you and what you want for yourself. So none of this is imposed by some higher order from us. It's all based on what you want for yourself.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
I mean, we've already been going for almost an hour, and I don't want to hold you guys up too much. So maybe another conversation or something on other questions I had, just not so much on personal stuff, but I guess on more of these maybe spiritual or psychological things.
Sure.
Yeah, because I know you guys are busy, so.
I could take another 20 minutes or so, but I could also end it now and we could go again. What about you, Merc?
Or I was going to say, if we wanted to just take a quick 2-minute bathroom break,
Sure.
or if anyone needs to, I'm good to keep going, so we could edit this part out and move on to like completely other subject for a little while.
I just remembered that finishing what I was saying. It's the only failure is the failure to learn. That's a quote by a Native American shaman named Stalking Wolf. So that's important to remember, I think, when we're considering all these things that we're working on in our lives, is that we're always going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
All the time. I mean, we're going to make mistakes every single day, multiple times. And the thing that helps is learning, not lack of making mistakes.
Right.
So that's something helpful to remember, especially if you tend to judge yourself harshly.
Yeah. That's certainly a tendency of mine.
Okay, good. So that's good. That's good to know. That now you can be more aware of that. I'm going to close the door. I forgot to close it, but you can keep talking.
Or what he just said, I just caught the end of that, but something about like worrying about making mistakes. I find another way you can look at life, because people are often, asking certain questions, what's right or wrong to do with your life. Like, I don't want to make a mistake and live the wrong way. You can also look at it like we are all fucking idiots. We're all chimps, like, that have no idea what we're doing. We don't know why we're here, where we came from. Like, we're all of us fucking making mistakes. And it's not a matter of, I don't want to make a mistake. It's a matter of, what's the best mistake I can make? What's the mistake I'm here to make? What's the mistake that's going to have the most upside and the least downside?
That's perfect.
And just even contemplating it like that takes some of the pressure off. Like, no matter what I do, because no matter what you do, it's not going to be perfect. In some way, there's going to be a mistake aspect. So not like, fuck, I want to get life right. But like, just knowing that everybody fucks life up, and it's just, what mistake do I want to make?
That's great.
Yeah, that's really helpful as well.
So you said you had some questions for us, just aside from what you were working on personally?
Yeah. So, and I guess this also has a personal aspect to it, but I saw a few times Mercury said that you have to make a conscious decision that life is meaningful, or from a Christian perspective, that God is good. And my question is, if I was going to say that if I was going to claim I believed in God in the Christian sense, or walk around saying that, then I would feel like I'm a fraud. Now, with this decision of saying here, or making the decision that life is meaningful, is this the kind of thing that you have to sort of go around and fake it till you make it, until you actually start seeing the effects? And is it the effects that sort of convince you that you've made this decision correctly? Or how does this work? Because I feel like, for me, just saying it to myself, maybe there's something I'm missing about that.
Okay, so it's not about making the declaration.
Right.
What you believe is not what you tell other people. I really agree with Peterson on this. What you believe is what you act on.
Right.
And so for me, where I found, and again, this is like this and the truth thing are just fundamental to me. It's the absolute basis of everything else that I think and believe.
Mm-hmm.
I faced it when suicidally depressed.
Okay.
And it had the utmost importance because I spent at my worst, I've twice had periods of depression that were nearly 2 years long. And the beginning might not be as bad and the end might not be as bad, but I've twice spent over a year where every night going to bed, it's just praying to die, meditating, trying to stop my heart. Every morning, it being like, oh, for fuck's sakes, I'm still alive. And when you're really suicidal, it's to the point where it feels like it's like an effort to stop yourself.
Going
and doing it. It feels like active. That just to sit still and not to get up and follow through with it at its worst. It's just active energy. And I realized that I had to decide, I had to face that question, is God good or not? And for me, the way I would say I believed it was, I decided yes to that. And at the point when I first did, I wasn't who I am today. So I didn't have the full awareness of all my parts, and I didn't define God in these multiple measures that I do now. I was thinking more just strictly, is God good or not? And you'll find that after that, you base things on it. So if God is good, what does that mean? So even I found later, the agnostic within me, that logical part of me that doesn't have the spiritual belief aspect to it, that just doesn't feel it. And eventually, okay, if God is good, I need to have a definition of God that works with that individual. And okay, so God represents the sum total of existence, represents our highest value, those various things. And again, even in that state, you just make the assumption existence is meaningful, and it will affect choices. And it affects everything else built from there up. And so you will, some atheists will like to bring up the suffering in the world and say, okay, then if God is good, then it's good that all these children die, and it's good that this, and it's good that that. And I agree with them. And still, I decide God is good. And so that decision has led me down certain trains of thought, even just philosophically. And so ultimately to me, therefore, it means that, Ryan, something I saw Tim Freak post. I just watched one of his videos off his channel, but he commented on the everything is perfect idea, that the universe is perfect. Talked at first about how, yes, he's achieved that state where it seems that way, but that when you get more realistic, no, everything's not perfect. And we're here making moral decisions and all of that. But again, I can incorporate that, but maybe that's because that's what a perfect universe is like. It involves these imperfections from limited perspectives. And perhaps evil serves the good. Perhaps it is better to have a universe with good and evil than it is not to. And I found Peterson did explore one side of that. It was one of those things where I had already had these thoughts of my own and was really excited to hear Peterson talk about it. But he describes how, and he looks at it from the perpetrator side. So in evil act, you've got your perpetrator and your victim. And he says how if you're incapable of doing harm, if you don't have a shadow, if you can't do evil, then you're just a harmless baby bunny. You're not good. You're just innocent. You're just weak. You're just, yet perhaps having the strength and all the other things that go into the evil act, including the ability to be evil, the desires that push you there, perhaps that is what makes someone truly good, when they can overcome all of that and do good. I agree with him on that, but I find he leaves out the victim side of it, because he will also say, what do you admire? What do you spontaneously admire? And that's a good sign that this is some, great inner truth. And how much do we admire forgiveness? Like when Christ said, "Lord God, forgive them. I know they know not what they do." Or I saw some video of, I might have this wrong, but some black guy got punched at a Trump rally by some old racist. And it was when I saw the footage in the court of them hugging and the black guy like forgiving him and wanting the best for the guy who has assaulted him. I just made my fucking heart glow. And the worse somebody has been hurt by someone else, if they forgive it and like genuinely forgive it, I admire that so fucking much. And it's such a big part of Christ's message. And like perhaps if there's angels, higher beings, if there's the higher perspective of God, and the tree is the metaphor for the world or for physical existence, it's like perhaps those moments of incredible forgiveness are just like the most gorgeous flowers blooming on that tree. And perhaps the strength of the perpetrators, like that Peterson talks about, who turn good, maybe they're the strength of the branches. And it's the forgiveness of the victims that are the gorgeous flowers. But I can see how God could be good without denying any of the evil that's in the universe. But that ultimately it all serves the good.
The other thing I would add to that is if you read Maps of Meaning, which is honestly, I think, foundational to understanding Peterson's work, because it's got everything in it. What he talks about in this book, and it's a really dense read, so I wouldn't expect anybody to take it on. But if you have the time to read, a 400-page textbook, then by all means, like, it's worth it. It really is. You really get to understand his ideas on a deep level. But one of the ideas he really lays out in Maps of Meaning is that we don't experience life as meaningless. We either experience positive or negative meaning. For example, when you're depressed, it's not that life is meaningless. It's just that you've assigned a negative meaning. So this whole argument about is life meaningful or not, well, the fact of just the objective experience of our lives is that we experience it in terms of meaning. So there's some sense that you don't even have to make an argument for meaning. You just have to make an argument for, is it positive meaning or negative meaning? Because the negative meaning would be life doesn't have any value, and that's why people use the term meaningless. But really it's just saying that, no, life is bitter and life is suffering, and that's all. And so we experience on this landscape from positive to negative meaning. And sure, sometimes we're in the neutral space where we feel a little bit ambivalent and indifferent, but for the most part, we're kind of sliding on this scale. So like when I feel really engaged and purposeful, I feel life has positive meaning. And when I'm really down and out, I feel like there's negative meaning. So it's kind of implicit, I think, in our everyday experience.
Oh, and I'd like to add one thing about forgiveness. Sometimes if somebody tries to take that hard line on forgiveness, but just one thing you get from the other side sometimes is like, oh, so what? If somebody kills a bunch of people, we're supposed to forgive them and just let them keep killing people? And that, not at all. I could imagine a justice system that even had like sort of Sam Harris's perspective of there's no reason to judge any person as wrong. You could even take that perspective of no free will, or you could take the Christian all-encompassing forgiveness perspective. And those work well together. And you would still need like prisons, but a prison isn't a place to punish somebody. The justice system would be about damage control and about rehabilitation of the person. So you can forgive somebody who has hurt you and still be realistic that they haven't learned their lesson, are likely to do it again, and take precautions to not be hurt again. It doesn't mean you have to let them keep hurting you, but you can take all of those precautions. You can do damage control while still totally forgiving and loving the person who's harmed you.
Yeah.
What else
That's
you
all
got?
to think about, but really, really interesting.
For sure.
So I guess another one that's that I've been thinking about recently. And it's kind of a different flavor than some of the other things we've talked about. But do you treat nightmares different than dreams, where you don't wake up absolutely terrified and have this like very deep primordial fear that lingers for like days, maybe?
Wow. Yeah. I just got done really writing about dreams as well. I had 2 papers. One was about biology and archetypes, and one was about the significance of interpreting dreams. And so one of the things that I looked into a little bit is, so when you're having a nightmare, one of the parts in your brain that's being stimulated is the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of your brain that's responsible for responding to threat, and it gives you a sense of anxiety, and it's trying to mobilize you. So it sends neurons down to your brainstem, to your autonomic nervous system, and it jacks up your sympathetic nervous system, which is to mobilize you, do something. So it's sending adrenaline through your whole bloodstream.
Right.
And so one way to look at a nightmare is it's attempting to mobilize you. So it's trying to say, get your attention. This is important. Pay attention to this.
Yeah.
And the reason that it comes in the form of fear is because fear is one of the things that will get our attention the most. Out of any human emotion, fear will get your attention quicker than anything else. Okay, and you can just look at how fast we adjust to positive things. Eric Weinstein commented on this on the Rubin Report when he was on there with Shapiro and Peterson and someone. There might have been someone else there, but one of the things he says, I think he went to Venice or something, and he was in awe for a day, and then by the 3rd day he was just like, oh, okay. So the point of that whole long tangent is that obviously if the dream just came in a form that was positive, then it wouldn't catch our attention as much. Right. So it brings in this negative threat response saying, pay attention, just like the snake in the grass. And so the first and foremost thing that I would consider with a nightmare is, okay, this is important. It's telling me to pay attention. And it might be showing you any various possibilities of your life patterns, the future that you're living into. It could be warnings. One of the things that Jung wrote about is how oftentimes dreams were warning people about the path they were on. And he said bad events have a very long incubation process. Right. So it kind of like settles in your psyche for a while, and it's building up to this one cascading event. Yeah. So that's one way to look at a nightmare is like, well, what's happening in my life? What's the path that I'm on? And what is the messaging telling me? Is it telling me to pick a certain path, or is it telling me to avoid a certain path? Right. You know, is it a past related thing? Is it telling me to address something in my past that I haven't fully integrated into my psyche? A trauma, a negative history, a belief system. So there's it's so subjective to the context of your life in combination with the symbols and images that are coming in, that you have to really look at it from that perspective. So like, what is the specific context of the dream? And so there's no universal code that I could give you saying, from my experience, and there's other opinions out there, but from my experience, I can't, like, for example, I don't like dream symbolism books very much, right? Because while they're helpful, they're also extremely limiting. It's just like dogma. It's like, if you see a horse, that means that you're having the ride of your life, or whatever. It's just like, it's such a limited perspective, because what a horse is to me and what a horse is to you in a specific context are two totally different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that at all answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
So there's different types of dreams,
Hmm.
but any dream you can view psychologically, because on some level it is psychological, meaning everything in your psyche is playing itself up on the dreamscape.
Right.
So it's all your projections, even other people that show up in your dreams are parts of you. Now, that's one level of analysis.
Right.
That's the psychological. Then there's the visionary level. In visionary dreams is when you start getting into the less scientifically explainable and more into the occult phenomena of, wow, I saw something happen in a dream and then it happened, or I'm tapping into something going on in the collective. So there's more of a shamanic aspect to it.
Right.
But even visionary dreams, you can work psychologically because it's still playing itself out through your psyche. So I always recommend that people work on the psychological level because it's the most reliable form to start with as a beginner doing dream work. And then if you're somebody who believes in spiritual phenomena, then you can start to work your way out in those concentric rings and get yourself into a more of a spiritual state. I don't think it's necessary. If you're not someone who believes that, then you can really just really work hard on the psychological place. All those images you're seeing are just these rich parts of who you are. It's just
right.
So that's what I would suggest is work it from that place for a while. And then if you feel more inclined to explore the shamanic side of dreams, you can ask yourself the question, okay, so like, could this be telling me something about the world? Or could this be telling me something about external events or even my own soul on more of a soul analysis level?
Right.
So, but the psychology of it is just so easy to work. And a lot of people claim to be healers and psychics and life coaches and therapists and all that, but without the proper training. And so you ultimately, if you don't practice something and then you call yourself an expert at it, or you call yourself even a proficient or a novice at it, you're kind of being dishonest. So it's just, I always warn people against it because I know that for myself, there's been times when I've been in a session with a client and I've been in over my head. I started working with people when I was 22. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I went through this life coach training program. It was super intensive. And I had one client who I think was definitely on the spectrum looking back at it. And I'd walk into his apartment and it would just smell horrible. And he was around my age and he was super antisocial and he just had a really hard time doing anything. And he wasn't very productive in his life at all. Right. And he had kind of been handheld his whole life. He'd been kind of enabled. And even his therapist was enabling him, which was extremely disturbing. Professional licensed therapist was taking him clothes shopping. It was just so horrible situation because he was clearly capable. He just was so trapped in this narrative of incapability. Even his therapist was enabling him. So at that point, you have to ask yourself the question, is that really therapy, right? So then what happened was I start working with him and it doesn't go anywhere. You just keep hitting these walls. And I'm I honestly wasn't trained enough to work with this person at that point. Now I would have a totally different perspective and I would have been way less enabling and way more hey, if you want to work with me, this is what we're going to do. And if you can't show up, then too bad. But I was kind of tending to his needs so much that I just became another part of this life where everybody walks around him, walks around his eggshells of his super fragile life. But nobody would say, hey, I believe in you, get your shit together. And I'm here to help you, but you got to show up.
And I'd like to say to what you said about going around trying to do dream therapy for other people. It's the same thing with also spiritual and magical practices. The number of people I know who started doing tarot card readings for somebody or whatever kind of therapy that they found useful, they go try to help other people. One is if you don't have a lot of experience, it's easy to get things wrong. Or even if you're just great at it, with dream therapy or a tarot reading, you may not be prepared for what you unlock in the person. give a good tarot reading and really tap into something, are you sure you're ready to have someone have a breakdown in front of you because they're now confronting something they've suppressed for 30 years? It's a heavy burden to draw certain things out of people. So I wouldn't go around casually trying to give people any sort of therapy, psychological or magical.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And even more generally, like when people find a fitness routine that works, or some career thing, or they suddenly join a church or get active in politics, really early on, they want to just get out there and make sure everybody fucking knows to live this way. And that's one thing I think, like one part of Peterson's message, like the metaphor of clean your room, like really worry about yourself, not the rest of the world. And some people criticize him that this is like for the sake of society. And so like it's what you should do because nobody wants to hear that bullshit from you. But I see it from the other perspective, that that's the way to have a fucking really fulfilling, meaningful life, is to focus on your life. And be the change you want to see in the world. And don't worry about pushing anything. Like I've taken the attitude of trusting that the overall universe knows what it's doing and that I'm here to just play my part. And I'm not interested, like even with you right now, I'm not interested in telling you anything that you're not interested in hearing. And people get caught up in trying to get messages out there, and social media really encourages that. Instead, I've taken the attitude of, and like really strongly, I just cut myself off from the world and slowly opened up a bit, but I'm not pushing myself into the world in any way. And I'm not looking to change the world. I'm not looking to change society. I wasn't looking to change you. But I did declare to the universe that I want to serve my purpose. I love everybody. I'm here to do what I can to help, but I will just sit back and wait until I'm asked. And so if you come to me asking me about something, I'm going to share everything I can that you're interested in. But that's very different from going up to somebody and saying, hey, you know what you really need in your life?
Yeah, well, you're also a really unique case because you, in some levels, you are the shaman of the tribe, right? You live on the outskirts of the society. You spend a lot of your time alone. You spend a lot of your time in meditation. And in indigenous times, the shaman would do that. They would be right on the outside, and they would needed their alone time so that they could meditate and they could contact whatever forces of energy and psychology they were in contact with. And then people would come to them for healing and insight. And that's why I never worry about with you, Mercury, because you've never once said anything that I viewed as potentially damaging. It's always been in some harmonic attunement with the person you're talking to. And so I just think that you're, I don't mean this to like be overly, like, I don't mean this to be like overly dramatic, but I just think that you're an exception to that rule. And I don't know how else to say it, but I do think that there's some.
Like lunatics are the exception to the rule. And it's interesting.
I didn't even mean it like from madman. I meant that as a compliment to your abilities, your natural abilities.
Yeah, I live in a different world than everyone else. And to me, it's more meaningful to discuss it metaphorically. I'm off the map on the edge where it says, here there be dragons. And it's the edge of this world and the other world. That's where I live. And my wife got me 2 books for Christmas. She got me Maps of Meaning, which I flipped through but haven't read yet. The other book she got me that I just got into today was, it's called Shamans Among Us. And it's by a Canadian psychologist, I believe. Actually, wait, it's just sitting right here. But it's by, the person's actually an atheist. It's Joseph Polomeni. But it's Schizophrenia, Shamanism, and the Evolutionary Origins of Religion.
Yes, exactly. That's such I'm so glad someone's writing about that, because I've been thinking about how shamans and visionaries are actually evolutionary components of reality. Like they're a part of that organismic drive towards creativity, and they're expressing it through particular people in society. And it's been passed down genetically for thousands of years. That's why you have people that have these amazing talents and skill sets. I mean, I'm not saying that it's all genetic. I'm just saying that there's this underground framework that lays the foundation for people to have more visionary experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I'm not saying it's all forms of insanity, but it's at least theoretically possible that certain forms of what we label as insanity are just I don't know, like in an anthill, the way different ants are born with a different purpose, like right down to it's a different body. And that just perhaps a few of us are meant to be the shamans or, because initially lots of things like art, really the beginning of science, if you trace it back, you'll hit alchemy and then you hit the previous practices and you hit shamanism, and spiritual insight, like even like Peterson talks about how these myths, like these religious stories, are possibly like a part of reality, like expressing itself through us, and that some of us are attuned to be the visionaries, and that if not properly trained, it's just destructive. And so that the modern world has forgotten how to use insane people. And again, if you classify it as an illness, as a disease, you're just trying to get rid of it. Like with a disease, nobody's like, you have cancer, great, how are we going to use this cancer? Whereas instead, we might be able to look at mental illness like, okay, great, how can we use this person? Or the same way I've seen Eric Weinstein talk about, he feels that certain learning disabilities are exactly that. That in fact, we're not tapping into a specific type of mind that, while limited in certain ways, has other abilities. And that if we don't use them right, they're not going to learn to read, they're going to, but treated like properly for whatever learning disability they have, they've got potentials other people can't tap. So it's possible that insanity is exactly that.
Well, even some of the most brilliant people in the world are on the spectrum.
Yeah, and like look at people like Van Gogh, or even there's, what's his name? Something Cantor, a scientist that developed infinity mathematics. He was in and out of the mental hospital, and he thought he was getting it from God.
Well,
and he'd go through a cycle of believing in it, developing this advanced math, and then he'd get depressed and think it was all bullshit, and would write to his friend, "I've wasted my life." But if I'm not mistaken, he died like in a fucking mental institution.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't despite his disease, because he was hearing that from God. And like, if the math turns out to work later, maybe he really was plugging into something there. And yes, those kind of instruments, that kind of mind, doesn't function well in many other ways in our world.
Well, that's what
if we can compensate them that and give them the right environment, we can get more of the genius out of our madmen.
So when I went to go film Ken Wilber and I was listening to him talk, it was so clear to me that he was just this encyclopedic mind. It was just insane. It was just like all the depth and width and every direction of volume and mass of information you could think of. He had it. Like he could tell you, he could take you through the Western history of philosophy, and then he could take you through the Eastern history of philosophy. He could take you through so many different components of into like the precise details, not just concepts. Like he could go down one rabbit hole for like a fucking hour. You could ask him one question, it could just be like, poof, and it would just go. But then there's also this sense of like he's not connecting socially like most monkeys. You know what I mean? Like he's not like reading the signs of the social environment. And so we all have our blind spots, and Carl Jung called them inferior functions. So he believed we all had different functions, and there was, this grid of functions, and some people had better exterior and some people had better interior functions. And so the point is that all we can ever do is be aware of what our inferior function is. We can never hope that like our inferior function is going to become just as dominant as our superior function, but we can start to work on developing it. And that's why Peterson talks about developing the parts of yourself that you're not so comfortable with, because that's helping you gain confidence in another area. And then that's only going to strengthen your ability where you're actually competent. So that's kind of like what you're doing right now. You're in math and you're exploring Carl Jung.
Yeah.
And you're jumping into this other world. So good on you for exploring all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to say one thing like I've thought repeatedly during all this, which is veering off topic, but back to what we said before. Your sense of limitation in regards to dating. I really don't think that's rational. When you're depressed, just tell yourself like,
it's okay to say no. And that might be a learning edge for you to be like, no, I'm not gonna re-engage this person, or I'm not gonna give this person what they want me to give them, because that's not what I want. What I want is this. And if I don't give myself that, there's going to be a really scary baby, hanging on me. So you can think of it in that way. And then you can think of how great things will be if you take care of that part of yourself and give it what it needs. And I think it'll be better for you, and it'll be better for everyone else in your future and in your present life.
Mm-hmm.
So good work, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking more time than we initially planned.
We went full Rogan on it.
No, but I found the last half even more engaging than the first, actually. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah,
so
me too.
Why don't you think about what you feel comfortable posting and what you don't, and then when you know the answer, then just tell me. And honestly, whatever the answer is fine. If you want to post none of it, that's fine. If you want to post all of it or somewhere in between, that's fine. So,
would you be able to send me a copy of this?
Why don't I post it, and then I'll post it as like a private video that only a couple people can have access to, like an unlisted video or something on my other YouTube account, and then you can decide what about it you want me to edit. Or if you like the whole thing and you want everyone to see it, then that's fine too.
Sure.
And I definitely would like to talk to you again in the future. Like, take some time to think about everything we went over here. Ignore whatever doesn't feel right to you. But whatever parts you find meaningful, and if you're going to pursue some of it, especially if we post this, I'd love to talk to you again. And I think that if you are happy with everything that's in here, that other people could find it really useful. And I think it'd be great to hear from you again in a few weeks or months or whatever, just whenever you're up to it. And just that I thought this went really well. And thank you for writing into us.
Yeah,
it was really an honor to get to know you, man. You're awesome.
Yeah, this was really helpful, and it was great to talk to you guys. Keep up the good work.
And I think like if we do post this, that a lot of people will find it helpful. And so far, like Nolan was great and said he wanted to come back again sometime. Rob recently had said he's going to come back on sometime. And I find like your everything about you is completely different from them. Like it's a nice variety of people. And so if you're comfortable posting this, I think it would be great because you're a different type of person. And I think there will be people out there that will identify with you more than them. So like all three of us really enjoyed this. So doing it on a regular basis could be fun.
Yeah. I'd definitely like to talk to you guys again sometime.
Anytime.
Yeah.
You can email us anytime and reach out anytime you want. And, you know, I'll take as many friends as I can get. So thanks,
Yeah,
thanks, man.
definitely. All right. I
All
really
right.
appreciate it again.
Yeah. See ya.
Yep, too.